Hello and welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Club. I'm Alice Edie and I'm with the amazing Jessamy G. And today we are interviewing Carissa Karamarko, artist, painter, extraordinary woman. Thank you for joining us, Carissa.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me to be here.
It's so lovely to have you.
Do you know what's nice about this? I was telling Jessamy this, Alice, but since you guys started the podcast, I have been talking to people and saying, the other day, my friend Jessamy was telling me this thing. And then I was like, oh no, Jessamy wasn't telling me in this like private personal conversation. Jessamy said it on the podcast and I listened to it and now I'm here retelling you. So it's this time I might actually get to say like, oh, I was talking to Jessamy or I was talking to Alice.
Or
it's real now.
You're talking to future you.
Yeah.
There's like a whole time travel element that's coming in
like those
there.
letters when people are like, what would you write to yourself as a 16-year-old? It's like, what would I say to myself next week or in 6 weeks?
What would you say? What's your message to future
I hope
you?
you started painting when you said you were going to.
Can I send a message to future me that I hope that you've submitted your tax return?
That's a big one.
Sorry, that was
That's
really
a
bummed me
real
out.
downer. All right.
It can only get better from
practical. She's a practical kind of gal.
Yeah.
Our Alice?
Even though I have a bookkeeper and an accountant, I'm still like, ugh, tax.
I know.
Anyway,
employing someone to do that doesn't somehow make it like a better task. It's just...
But I don't really have to do all that much is my point. Just like, I don't know, lots of numbers on pages. It's like lots of chords, like tech things. There's no reason for it to make me feel stressed, but it does.
Numbers are that for me. Like in seeing a number or a collection of numbers, it's just instant stress. Yeah. And my brain cannot digest it because my stress response is like, no, we don't like these or we are not good at them. And I hate looking at them.
That's so interesting. I think I'm the same.
Yeah.
Even though it's like... numbers have done nothing to me.
No. And it's like, and even if they're numbers that there's no expectation of you to do anything with, like they just are there being themselves.
I don't know. But then there's like an additional layer to that where I get angry with myself for being the cliche of a creative. And I'm like, no, you can do both things, right? Like you can be...
Absolutely you can.
You don't
Maybe you can.
I mean, I can't.
I believe in you from way over here, and I can give you some numbers to work with that terrify me. But I know what you mean. It's all those things that it's like, oh, I'm a creative. I'm supposed to be like bad at sport, bad at maths.
Yeah.
And my life should be a mess. And I drink wine at 9 a.m.
And then fuck that. Like we're not the cliche, but then every now and then you kind of are.
I know. It's hard to like... Because also some things are just you.
Oh, are we getting emails?
We're getting some notifications.
Oh
no, they're numbers.
Busy?
They're numbers. Run.
They hurt us.
I will work out how to turn those off. In the meantime, we've skipped over the one and only sort of
the one rule.
Constant of the podcast, which, as you know, Carissa, we forgot it last time when we had your partner Mikey on. So remember to message you last night.
And spontaneity is just his thing because he managed to find it and be prepared, whereas I would be just like scrolling through an endless amount of crap. Carissa is just a second human being in the world, and so I am prepared.
All right. So for anyone that is joining us or is new to the pod, we have a tradition, I would call it, or our only piece of structural integrity, which is starting off our interview by asking you to please read your own bio. So without further ado, Carissa.
All right. Carissa Karamarko is a multidisciplinary designer and artist living and working in Melbourne. She's the co-founder and designer of Studio Ting, a creative studio making furniture and decorative art pieces for the home. Alongside the studio, Carissa is an oil painter and has been a finalist in numerous art prizes, including the Geelong Contemporary Art Award, Muswellbrook Art Prize, and the Mossman Art Award. She is represented in her painting practice by St. Cloche in Sydney, and her work is held in collections across Australia. As a curious daydreamer, Carissa allows herself to dip out of reality and plunge deep into the gifts offered up by life. The way the light catches, an arrangement of objects in an accidental harmony, or something equally as fleeting. This state of being is central to her creative work and feeds an unrelenting need to create, connect, and expand.
Yeah. Well done.
She
Thank
sounds
you,
awesome.
Carissa. Yeah, I want to hang with that girl.
I like her too.
Yeah.
Good.
And you wrote that, Carissa?
Yep, I did. So that's my like combination bio of like just trying to communicate, I guess, who I am more broadly. I have like a much longer art specific bio or like painting specific bio that I did not write because it's kind of laden with lots of art terminology that's important. More important, I think, to the painting world that exists. There are just certain things that need to kind of be ticked off and covered and that people want to know about your practice that I think I'm too close to my practice to do. So that I had a writer do on my behalf, but this one I wrote.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And it appeared to me, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but you appeared quite comfortable in reading that. It didn't seem to be super awkward for you.
No, I am. I'm very comfortable reading those things. I try to follow this like philosophy of like, yeah, that tracks. Like, yeah, I did those things and that's who I am. I think if it feels uncomfortable to me in anything I'm writing, because I do a lot of writing for myself, for the studio or for my practice, if it feels cringy when I'm reading it, I feel like I have to go back because it's either like something's maybe not entirely true or I've like indulged a little bit too much or there's something going on that doesn't feel right. So it's like a bit of a sense check for me. If I can read that and be comfortable and happy, like it's all good. And that's what I meant to say, essentially.
I really like that as a, like a sense check that it shouldn't be cringy.
No.
Here's one thing. So Alice and I have a like a shared document where I just sort of do like brain dumps of things we might talk about on the podcast at some point in time. And some of them I look back, I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, that might have been after a few lines. But one that I've actually it appeared on there twice, was thoughts on the phrase fake it till you make it. And I think it's interesting with things like bio writing or CV writing or like job applications, there's almost an expectation to beef it up a little, which
so
is
true,
why
isn't
it feels really cringy a lot of the time to read things out.
Yeah, it's like the traditional way that we think about applying for a job or, you know, it's like, oh, I'm competing in a pool of people and I have to do that thing that stands out. Like when everyone was talking about, you know, cover letters and resumes and don't just like write it, you know, put it in a balloon and then send it to them and they'll pop it and you're like, your cover letter will spring forth as like a, you know, hologram.
You have to tattoo it on the belly of a Labrador puppy and then release it into their office.
And then carry the puppy like a baby into their office and they'll just like, there's no way they won't hire you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you sort of get caught up in those things of like, yeah, let's really pump this up or, you know, talk about yourself in a way that you're not comfortable talking about yourself, which is a different scale for different people.
It's interesting hearing you use the word cringe because it makes me think of like, okay, using cringe as a metric, right? Like, so you read out your own bio and you hear your voice saying these things. And if it hits you with that cringe factor, because like that's a really helpful thing to reflect on because it's such a visceral response to something. And then after that, you can kind of unpack. Yeah. You're like, oh, I don't know, that feels icky. Yeah. Why? Like dive into that. And sometimes the reason might just be insecurity. Like maybe it is just that some people are uncomfortable saying the thing.
Definitely.
At which point you can be like, okay, cool, no, that stays. But if it is, you know.
And your body gives you physical cues for every form of discomfort. So I think the more that you follow those cues of like, why in my stomach does something not feel right? Or like reading this out, I feel cringy or some discomfort. What is it? Is it an insecurity? If it's insecurity, okay, maybe I just have to push through because these things are still true. And you don't want to go into the territory of like, underselling yourself or being too self-deprecating. So knowing what the discomfort means to you is super important in all life.
Interesting. Cringe as a metric. Love it.
Yeah, a little cringeometer.
Yeah.
I have I think it's called the School of Athens, which is this concept of the people that have like a short list of people that you keep in your head that are the people that you've decided that their opinions matter to you. And it should be like maybe 5 or 7 people. and we all carry around our School of Athens in our head, and that's I think it's linked to the cringe thing, because for me, I have like one or two friends, and if I'm feeling weird or cringy about something, I kind of like mentally check in with them, and I'm like, if Jordan heard me say that, how would like what would his response be? Because that way it kind of also gets me out of my own head, and I'm like, is this my stuff, or is this actually just because I'm representing myself in a way that I wouldn't feel good about?
Yeah. I love that too, because we don't often step out of ourselves to see how someone else views you. Like, the closest people to you think you're the best, and they think everything you do is amazing, or they're just such a supporter of you and, you know, can see all those wonderful things about you. But when you're especially doing a task that you don't like, which might be writing your bio or whatever it is, you just can't see yourself outside of your own bullshit, like outside of the things that do make you uncomfortable, or your insecurities, or whatever it is. That person who you're imagining is just not inhibited by that form of you. That's a nice way of doing things.
How was it having someone write a professional bio for you?
It was a nice experience. It felt very much like this is something I don't need to be burdened with, because it was sitting there as a task. Like, I had this really old painting bio that didn't represent me anymore. Every time I read it, I felt uncomfortable. I had that feeling of like, this isn't what I want to communicate about myself and about my painting, and especially in that world where it's looked at so much and it is considered so much. When I was thinking about writing it, and then thought, okay, I might actually just get someone who does this all the time for other artists, get them to do it. And the experience was really nice. I basically just had a phone call with her where she asked me a whole bunch of questions and what she needed, and then I received it back. And it was kind of cool to read it, because she pulled things out of what I said that I never would have myself, because they're just the things you think and feel about your own practice. But she's listening for different things that go into her writing and that are involved in her process. So it was like a combination of my process as an artist and her process as a writer. And then she was able to pull things out that I never would have heard myself say. So yeah, it was nice to receive it back. And then I think I just changed like one or two things that I was like, I don't think that was quite what I was trying to say. And it was just more about my speaking, just like constant kind of answering of the question and speaking, not necessarily how it was translated. It's like, I think I meant to say this instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great experience. And then now I've got this like whole thing that I can just send away, and it feels good and it's really descriptive. And I know that if I did it, I just would have spent 10 minutes on it and probably felt uncomfortable about it and sent it off and never looked at it.
Yeah. Outsourcing is something I'm quite interested in, because I think, as a sole trader or an individual artist, you just like, it's not, you're usually not able to outsource a lot of things early on because you don't have any money.
Yeah, because you
to do
cannot
it. That's
pay
pretty much
someone
the
in
reason.
exchange for their services.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. But it was something I was thinking about last year, and I'll post this up in the show notes, but I sort of made this little model where you've got, let me remember, you've got ability on one axis and interest on the other. So some things you might have like low ability but high interest in one, and then you might go and learn it. But if you've got low ability and low interest, then outsource it. If you've got high ability and high interest, then you do it.
That's cool.
So great. That's amazing. I can't wait to think more about this.
I come back to it all the time because it's like, okay, say something like, I don't know, servicing your car, for example. So obviously that's something I outsource, but you might be someone who is really interested in mechanics and be like, you know what, I'd love to learn how to do this myself. Or I don't know, I'm struggling to think of an example, but
I actually have a real life example right now, because with the studio, we're in that stage. We can't just pay everyone to do things that we either don't want to do or feel like, it's taking us away from something. One of those things that became really obvious when Mikey and I both had the flu a couple of months ago at the exact same time as we approached a deadline was that we had a bunch of mirrors to make, wall mirrors and hand mirrors and everything for a deadline. And the flu hit us right at crunch time. And we just had to get it done. And so Mikey was in the studio just working overtime to get it done. And I felt absolutely useless because I don't know how to weld. So, and it really stood out to me because it's like we do everything as a team always, and we pull each other through these moments, and I can't be there doing anything. So, and then we sort of talked about how eventually this need's going to emerge for more than one person to be on the tools, and is that we outsource someone? Do we get someone into the studio helping? And then I was like, fuck that, I'm going to welding school. So I'm in welding school right now. And it's like eventually, and it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, lots of interest because I would love to learn that. So yeah, why not? Go and learn. I don't know in like what capacity I'll use it day to day, but at least I know, and if there is a situation where I need or want to jump in, I can and have those skills. So it's happening.
It's also just really a badass skill to have too. Like I'm picturing you,
quite nice.
but in my mind you're wearing some sort of like hot leather fit
and I just like
with the mask down
right into every class, and I take my welding helmet off and I like
it's
smooshing my hair
the welding
around.
helmet, but you need to be wearing like overalls, but you've taken them down on the top part because it's really hot in
like
the
one
studio.
on one
one
down,
side.
and I've got a bikini underneath, for, like no reason at all. And
Suddenly you've got
in the
tattoos.
background. I've got a big chest piece, like a big chest tribal.
Is that what welding looks like?
It's exactly what it looks like. And there's music all the time. She's my cherry pie. Every time.
You all ride motorbikes.
Yeah, into the class. Like
Yes.
that's exactly what welding school is. Very little welding. Just all performance.
So how far through how long is the course and how far through it are you?
8 weeks.
Yeah.
The first class I missed because I had COVID. So I've been to one class, which was last Wednesday. My second class is tonight. So I'm making a cube.
Nice.
And it's going excellent. Yeah, I love it. I actually love it. It was like I left that class and I thought this was amazing and I feel so good. Like it was 4 hours and I just felt like meditation because you kind of get set up at your station and you've got, like helmet on and it's very, very insular. Like you sort of form this little welding cave around you and just like all the sounds and the smells and just like working on this thing was just really, really meditative. Considering it's like the first time you're doing something, you don't often get that sort of tune out response. But yeah, it was really nice that it happened. I just loved it. I'm so excited to go back.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like being a beginner at something is something we talk about a lot on this podcast and when it's comfortable and when it's not. And I feel like that's something that could go either way because you're doing it because you're really interested in it, but there's also stakes involved.
Definitely.
And you'd be thinking, well, I would be thinking about like, how am I going to relate this to my work and when will I be good enough to be able to do it in that way.
Like make it mean something.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have always jumped into things since I was a kid. So I have the experience of new things quite often. My mum always laughs about this story that I was like the tiniest kid in school, like an absolute minuscule little baby. And the sports kind of would come along and I'd enter myself in everything, like high jump, long jump. I'd be like running a race dead last and like waving and I had more participation little like ribbons than any kid because I would just throw myself into everything and try everything. So I still get nervous, especially as an adult, like that sort of adult nervousness comes in way more than I was a kid, but I do often just do things before my brain has the opportunity to say, but that's a bit scary. But it's just like as I approach the time, I get those feelings of like, why didn't I sign up to a welding course? Like what high was I riding? And I was like, I'm going to do a course. It's going to be great.
She thinks she is.
Yeah. Who was I that day?
Amazing.
But it's kind of nice because you get this like just default doing of things rather than thinking about doing. I tend to not really think about doing things that's true and that's not true. I think about things all the time and constantly. But when it comes to actually doing them, that leap is very short of, you know, me. And I find feelings are often connected before I realize they're connected. Like I'll be thinking about something for a really long time and just like ruminating on a particular thing in my life. And then it often manifests very quickly into doing something. So I think for me with like this welding journey, it probably stemmed from feeling like I have less ownership in my business than Mikey, because that's like kind of a constant thing since we started, not between us from like external perception that I'm not as involved in the studio or like I'm not really in it. So little comments kind of build up for me. And so I think sitting there and feeling like I can't get in there and help is probably 50% I want to do all these things and 50% I think I should, or like I have more to prove.
That's really interesting. Where I imagine some of it is because your studio is called Studio Ting and his name is Mikey Ting.
Definitely. I had no idea how much would be hung on a name until I went through this process. Like it's really got me thinking about names and like how much we associate with a name or how much we load into a name. It just sounded cool, to be honest. Like when we were first starting out, I was like, that's a great name for a studio. And it's a family business and it's all these like wonderful things. And then you put that like really beautiful thing into the real world. And it's amazing to watch kind of what happens to it for good and bad, or like, it's just been a wild experience. But yeah, you're true. It's so correct. It's that.
And maybe potentially because you also have such a strong independent fine art practice under Carissa Karamarko, that there's kind of like you are associated strongly with that as well.
For sure.
So maybe that's as well where that divide happens in people's
it's like it
head.
all contributes to this thing of people working out exactly what it is.
Yeah. How do you manage that? How do you manage having a foot in a fine art practice, and then a design practice, which both kind of require quite a different way of thinking about creative production?
Yeah. It's what I've always wanted. This like split, totally kind of opposite design and art and making. It is for me what was missing solely through painting. Like I used to go in waves with painting of like, you know, this can't be it, or I feel like there's so much I can't put into my painting, especially when you're moving through the world of professional painting. There's an expectation of what you paint. You start to be sort of commercially known for painting a certain thing or a certain way, and it becomes extremely rigid and really hard to move around the world of painting.
That's so counterintuitive. I think it's not what people think from the outside, right?
Yeah. But at every turn, it's a consideration of like, okay, that was the last show and people bought paintings and there's people who buy from each show. So it's like things need to make sense. They need to move in a very clear path so that path can be explained to a collector or to someone who just follows your work. It's like you can see how they got from this point to this point because they were slowly moving through it. And so I found that sometimes there was just, I had so much more to give, or there was other ways I wanted to express myself or other mediums I wanted to use. So having the studio as this totally separate beast and a totally different way of like making and expressing is just perfect, because I get to dip in and out of the two things and they're both better for it. My painting's better for it because it doesn't have to be everything to me anymore, and it doesn't have to satisfy every creative urge I've ever had, and then I don't get let down when I don't feel that. It's painting. It is what it is, and I enjoy it and I can step away from it. Yeah.
Ideal.
Very.
I'm quite fascinated by the sort of like fine art gallery world because I understand absolutely zero about it. And it's also something that has always, to me from the outside, felt quite sort of like terrifying and exclusive, and like I've never felt comfortable even just being in galleries, and that's still true today. Like I think that a gallery is like one of the worst places to view art.
You feel that way because it was made that way. Yeah, right. It was made to make you feel that way.
It's not accidental.
No.
Yeah, right. So could you Could you maybe tell us a little bit about did you go to art school? How did you get involved with your gallery? How does it work? And why does it make me feel terrible about myself?
Why do I hate all of these experiences?
How does someone become an artist when they grow up?
Yeah. So, okay. No, I did not go to art school. And there's this constant and big debate about going to art school and not going to art school. They're both equally valid paths to take. I actually went to audio engineering school, is what I did when I left school. I was deciding whether to study art or music, and I went and became an audio engineer. And then
I did not know this about
not
you.
many people know this. Sometimes I forget, and I'm like, oh yeah, I did that, and I have those skills, and like.
Sorry, sidebar. I am just suddenly remembering how long it took us to set up the sound this morning.
And I said nothing.
Where were you?
You sat there and you watched.
And I drank my Barocca. And I just went, this is not a me problem. Yeah. No, I actually didn't have any of those thoughts, which I think is worse, that I just sat here like I don't know. But I do. I think, yeah. It's That's honestly, amazing. I forget sometimes too, and then I remember, and it's like, oh yeah, I had this whole part of my life.
So what do? Sorry. So when you were working as an audio engineer, like as in at venues, that kind of thing? Or?
Not for very long. I really didn't do it professionally very long at all. I was working as like, there was this guy, you know, I used to get a job back in the day where it's like, yeah, call my friend, you know, Peter, because he has this venue and he'll just like give you a job for no reason. It was kind of like one of those situations. I can't even remember how the connection came about. I was working for this guy who... He was like, it was out in Richmond in New South Wales. So it was this like real kind of country town that you're like, why is there a small American country town in New South Wales, Australia? But I was working for him as like a general music assistant. He was manager for someone like Lee Kernaghan or someone like that, like a real big time country guy. And I just used to like... do like music admin on his behalf, and then one day he just like went on tour and never came back, and I didn't have a job anymore. But it was you were so young that none of these things mattered. You're like, this is fine. It's just like, oh yeah, he went to do the gympie ute muster and started a new life or something. I don't know.
Isn't it wild when you think back to those times? And you're like, oh yeah, but like we were all kids. And you're like, no, wait, hang on. Everyone else were proper grown-ups.
Yeah,
like I
there were adults involved.
But what's his name that disappeared to Gimpy Ute Muster? He was an adult.
He was an employee.
He was literally just like, oh, I'm just popping out to buy some cigarettes.
Totally happened. And I didn't question it. I didn't ask anyone. What about that job that I used to go to once a week? I just accepted that I just didn't go there again. So... yeah, and then I worked for another similar situation, like a guy who ran venues, and he needed someone to just be there on their like live music night and check that everything was good, and then just hang out till the show was over and help do like all the pack down and stuff. But outside of that, I didn't really work in it too much. I don't think I could see myself in it. It was also a time where being a woman in those industries was not totally cool, and there weren't as many. There used to be on one Tool album, a female audio engineer, and I just remember her being like held up as like a see, there is one, because it was just so rare that a woman would like ascend to that level. You just kind of had to accept you're going to work in like downstairs basement dingy recording studios for your entire career, and that's all you can expect, while all the the star rows of all these amazing audio engineer men. That's sort of the climate at the time. I have no idea if it's different. And I was kind of balancing still the two, like art making versus the music path. And I just kept making the whole time, kept painting. It was something I always did. And I was doing like little group exhibitions. There was like a place in King's Cross, I think it was called World Bar. And they used to do like a once a month exhibition that was like part rave, part exhibition.
Amazing.
I know, and it just had this combination of like such crazy art, because it was just people who were painting things or making stuff, and there was no entry level essentially. Like it was just, if you've made something and you want to be part of this, like, yeah, you can have some space to hang a bunch of paintings. So I would do stuff like that, and like, you know, go around and just poster up my own like gig posters essentially for these things, and just always kind of kept a foot in it and in that world. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, I have to take something seriously here, and I really wanted to make a good go of it. And in the meantime, I'd gone back to study graphic design because it's like, maybe I need something that's like close to it but is not it. So I did that. And then I thought, I'm going to give myself a good year to just like have a good crack at this, throw everything I've got into it. And then after that year, if it's worked, amazing. If it hasn't, at least I know I gave it everything and I really, really tried. And then that was like just a magic year for me. It just transformed my entire practice. I was like getting into art prizes left, right and center, and it was all just working. So it was like when I committed to doing it, I got all these results, and it's like the universe just showing me, yeah, you can do this, or you've got something here, and you just need to take your foot out of all these little things and into
scary.
something.
Like, were you working at that stage?
Yep.
Did you rent studio space? Were you at home? Like,
No,
what did your day-to-day life look like for that year?
So I was working. I've worked so many jobs, just like graphic design jobs, and the last like lead up into probably like 6-year lead up into doing this all full time was in interior design and architecture, which kind of led me into the studio as a practice. It sort of like paved that pathway. But I was working at night. I was working on my painting practice just from my apartment, my room. I had like sectioned out my room into like sleeping space, working space. It's just like paint everywhere. Oil painting in your bedroom is not ideal. Just like,
but I think that's amazing, because I think a lot of people would take away from that statement, if you're like, yeah, I gave myself a year to kind of really go at it.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds like this magical year of painting, right? Where like you have not another care in the world and no other responsibility. You moved to Paris, you painted every day, eating croissants. And it's like, no, that year was still you working. That was still you. You having a go at it. It was like in the evenings when everyone else was watching TV.
Exactly. It was that. I think it was like the year of sacrificing just all other things, you know, in pursuit of it, and putting myself out there more than I had, and a commitment to just entering art prizes when that whole thing is just like, you know, really scary and full of rejection, and to just, you know, keep going past that and do another one and keep painting. So eventually I ended up with this body of work, and I used to go every day the same like bus route to and from work. And it would go past St. Cloche, and I would look into that gallery every day, and I would just think that's just the most beautiful gallery on earth. I love it, and that's where I want to be. And I just cold call emailed them one day, which is also just not a done thing. And I just put together like a little booklet of all the paintings I had in this body of work, and told them that I love the gallery and this is what I do. And Kitty Clark, the director of St. Cloche, she said, can I come and have a look at them? And I was like, I don't have a studio. All those things where you're just like, they're going to find out I'm not a real artist. Like, because I paint in my room and I have a day job and all those things that you don't think people are supposed to know about you as an artist. So I like gallery hung all my paintings in my house. I just like put all these 3M hooks up, and I told her like, oh, it's my house. It's not my studio. I don't even know if I was explicit about saying I don't have a studio, but it was just like, oh, they're all at my house. And I just hung them up, and she was there for all of 10 minutes and just looked at them and was like, yeah, great, let's do this. So it just kind of felt like a big dream that wasn't happening, because it just felt like it felt like a thing that just happened, but as I talk about it, it didn't just happen. It was a result of all of this time and this consistent effort that led to that. So, yeah, that's kind of how I did it.
I think there's, in my own experience and in experience of I think all of my friends who have at some point like taken that leap into starting their own, you know, full-time arts practice or small business or whatever the thing is, there's a turning point where you decide, I'm going to give this a proper go, and you have to remove your safety net, You have to take a proper fucking jump. And whether that jump is like, you know, quitting your part-time job, that might not be practical because you need to eat. But it might just be saying it out loud to everyone you see, like, I am an artist. I am doing this full time. That could be your jump. But at some point, if you don't like...
So true. It's
do that, you can never... Like, you might be able to keep making art forever, but... you'll never sort of be able to see how far you can go without...
I feel like anything I've ever gotten in my life that is of critical importance to me as a human has only come after making a leap or a decision or an uncomfortable thing where it's like all that is there for you and you can have it. There's no question. But you have to either do this work first or make these changes first or be this person, and that'll open itself up to you. So that's been my experience in anything. It's all there. You've got to do something that disrupts the life you have. It's like everything is set, and if that's what you want, that's great. But if this thing you want is over here, you've got to just do a little like tectonic plate shift and then it will all open up.
Yeah, you know? That's it. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's cool if that's what you want. But if you want something different, it's going to be uncomfortable for a time.
How do you manage your time between, and it's almost a two-part question. So the first part, thinking back to that year, so you had a day job, but at night you're working towards this dream and you've decided that's what you want and you know that that's what you want. So you're kind of still needing to be a responsible grown-up and pay your rent, but kind of not give one drop extra energy to that, but also make sure that you are still maintaining that, right? So like you're finding that balance of like doing the day job and the night work, and then now that you do have these two different careers that run concurrently, how do you manage your energy across those two things?
I think a lot of it is what you said in like not doing more than I have to at this thing that I don't really want to do, which was a struggle for me because I tend to just, if I'm doing something, I'm doing it and I don't want to let anyone down I used to. I've gotten much better about people get let down and sometimes you're going to be the source of that letdown and that is fine. You know, you have to get to that point. But I think it was making it a priority of like, you can still do your day-to-day, but it's just maybe what you do after those hours, like going home and like going out for a drink or watching TV or whatever it is, it's, you know, managing that kind of nighttime life with as much routine and as much, seriousness as you take that day job of like, well, I have to maintain a certain level of doing this job well because I can't afford to not have this job anymore or to lose it by underperforming. What helped me, though, in a really big way was being honest with the person that I was employed by, that I had this whole other thing and that it was a priority. I think there's sometimes like an expectation that you don't make your employer aware that you have ambition outside of their business or that you have an arts practice or whatever it might be. But I found by being honest, one, they were super interested. And also that person knows people, they know people who might be interested in the thing you do. And if it's a good person you're working for, they'll encourage those, that other side of you or encourage your dreams and ambitions. And as a result, I know in my case, I stayed a lot longer than maybe I would have if I didn't like the people I worked for, if I didn't feel like they were helping me with that balance. It meant I could take time off if I needed to and be honest about that. Like if I was working towards a show, I could say I need like a day or two off, in the week of, because I've got all this planning stuff to do. So that really helped manage it. And what I will say though is that like you can't do it forever. And eventually you got to make that choice because it just suffers. And the easiest thing to suffer is your creative output because it doesn't just require this like on-off switch of turning up to a job and, making cups of tea every 20 minutes. It requires more from you than that or from the jobs that I had. So it's like it has to have an end date. But it's possible. Yeah.
It's like, what's the quote from Parks and Rec? It's like, don't half-ass two things, just full-ass one thing.
Full-ass one thing. Yes. And don't full-ass the day job that you don't want.
Yeah.
The end. Like,
yeah. That's interesting though. I think we sort of make assumptions that, that like, oh, my boss wouldn't like this, or they wouldn't be supportive, or they wouldn't understand. But that's not necessary. I mean, that might be true sometimes, but I think a lot of the time, and I think this is increasing as well in corporate environments, that people are actually interested and they're realising the value in understanding human beings as a whole and what their dreams and aspirations are, both within and outside that job. And I think for the most part, most people want each other to succeed and be happy, and you just never know. Like, one thing that I've learned, I think, is, and it can be really uncomfortable and scary, particularly at the start of something, but the more you talk about the thing that you're starting like it's real, because it is, you're just at the start of it, but the more people you tell, the more practiced you are at talking about it. You just don't, like, you don't know who Joe Blogs up at the coffee shop might be, you know, what ideas they might have, who they might introduce you to or whatever.
And what their other thing is as well. Because sometimes that person has this whole other thing that might be related to what you're doing, or their partner or their friends. So it's exactly right. The more you talk about the things that you love, it just amplifies it because it excites people. Even just watching someone talk about this thing that they love, it's just the best. And the way their face lights up and they're excited, it's like they're the conversations that, like, we're all humans. That's what we want. No one really wants to have like cooler conversation about your weekend. And you're like, yeah, it was okay. I just want to go coffee. Like, that's, you know, that's fine. But if you can maybe have a different conversation that's like, oh, I painted all weekend because I have an arts practice, or I made candles because that's the thing I do and love, or whatever it is. It's just a way cooler conversation. And then if they don't feel that way, like, you really shouldn't be there anyway. Find someone else, find a different job. Jobs are jobs. They come and go, and, you know, there's plenty of them out there. And there's lots of people who are willing to support you and understand that you're a human.
Also, I think people that do things in the world, like having a bias towards action attracts and draws in other people who have a bias towards action, because once a thing is moving, it's so much easier to course correct and steer something that's in motion versus getting something that's stationary. Just moving the thing from zero to something is a lot harder than taking a thing. It might not be perfect, but it's you at least know that person is someone who does stuff. So you're like, okay, cool, less of this, more of this. Let's try and aim it in this direction. But you're not having to generate the energy to move them. And I think people are drawn to that. And like you're saying, Jess, like letting people know the thing that you make gives them, they kind of like, okay, cool. Yeah, we can plug into that, or we can align here, or work together in this way.
Like, oh, okay, I've got all of this like design work that needs to be done by someone. Maybe I can give it to Alice that after she's finished doing whatever her job here is, she can maybe do that because she's interested. And I know that now about her. It's, you know, I think we just assume that you're not supposed to want those things, or that whatever you're doing during the day, that's the thing you're doing. And then if you happen to do this thing at night, that's great. But make sure your plan B is solid, and that plan B is a steady job. So like, don't compromise that. Don't let them know, because they get inside your brain too much. Like, it's vulnerable and compromising and all those things I don't think are true.
Was that something in your upbringing? Like, how have your parents been? Have they been like, that's great, draw the pictures, but also like you need to have a solid plan B?
Yeah, I think I got that advice a lot from different people. And I remember, I think my parents have always been incredibly supportive of whatever I've wanted to do, and probably suffered under my like tendency, like I said, to just do things. Whereas like for me, I know all this introspection and thought and stuff that I've put into a decision, but then I just blurt the decision out, which is completely fine for me to do because that's who I am. But I like can acknowledge that for people hearing it sometimes who haven't been privy to all the steps, it can be a bit crazy or a bit like, whoa, hang on, okay, let's slow down. What are we doing? But that said, yeah, they've always been supportive of a decision I've made. You know, I'm going to go be an audio engineer. Yep, great, do that. Or I'm doing this painting. They're at every show. They always come. They always tell people about it. And, you know, and they're extremely proud of me. But the notion of like having a job and a steady job and like, you know, doing those things at the same time is definitely something that was messaging for me of like, make sure you've got that. I think it made them more comfortable letting me do what I wanted to do. And it was just the time of the, you know, that time in the world where there was less creative jobs, like quote unquote, or they seemed less available or just available to like a very finite group of people. So I totally absorbed that messaging and believed it. And I think I repeated it probably to a lot of people before I understood more about myself and about those paths. You know, I'm sure I've given the advice of have a plan B and, you know, find it like maybe study something so that it's similar. But I don't really believe that now. And those beliefs has definitely changed where I think, no, I mean, always look after yourself. Always make sure that like you're going to be okay. But put everything you've got into this thing. Just, there's nothing to lose.
Yeah, that's right. And we had Dr. Marion Piper on last week, and she ended with her own little mantra, which was, why not me?
Yeah.
And so even if there are a finite amount of positions available in the arts or doing this thing or a successful artist, but why not you?
Yeah,
it's got to be someone.
Exactly. And it's the people who have been uncompromising on that it's going to be me. And I'm going to do everything I can do to do it. And I know it's not that simple sometimes. And it's, you know, we're in extremely privileged positions to be able to say, I'm going to go after this thing I want. And there's no boundaries to me getting those things. And this whole conversation like exists at that level of privilege, that it's almost kind of like a duty that if you're at that level of privilege and you can decide, like, there's no reason why those spots are unavailable to me, you know, in the world I live in and in my privilege. So, yeah, why not me, you know? And I would always encourage that thinking of, yeah, go and do it. It can be you. Work out what it is you want and then just do everything in your power to make it possible for as long as it makes you happy, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same with the yes, like obviously we are having these conversations with the assumption of like extreme privilege that we are all lucky enough to have. And I think that acknowledgement of that privilege obviously is very important, but can also be very uncomfortable. And I like the framing of it. It's you can't do anything about like that's we're lucky to find ourselves in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And I think seeing it as your duty to be like, I'm going to do the best I possibly can with this, whether that is having an arts practice or being the best lawyer you can be, or, you know, whatever your thing is. I agree. I think that acknowledgement can sometimes be uncomfortable, but the worst thing you can do with it is nothing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's all there for you. Do or don't do, or like you say, whatever it happens to be. It doesn't have to be this like big kind of creative dream. It can be in just whatever your day-to-day is. But yeah, do something with it. If that's stirring inside you and if that's like constantly knocking at you of like, there's bigger here or there's more here for me, I know. Stop ignoring it. So like the uncomfortable feelings we talked about of like things in your body letting you know it's not right. Things will also let you know when it is right of, you know, we have that little internal door for a reason that someone's knocking at to say there's more. If you're not content, just and keep everything as it is. You don't have to like set your life on fire. Just like,
wait, what?
I'm running away to join the circus.
Down the ladder.
My strategy. Is that not going to work?
I mean, it's an available tool. You can just burn it down if this all just goes totally pear-shaped.
I feel like I've given it a good crack a few times in my life.
Yeah. Really, really. Especially in those like early 20s, just like really tried to burn it down in a big way.
So how do you sustain yourself given that your career asks of you a very personal, very creative, very intense commitment? How do you how do you make sure that you're able to give that, and how do you look after your time, your energy, your brain, your heart?
I think I'm constantly working that out because, and I don't think I've been typically good at it, especially when I let go of those like plan B routines of having a job that that was like a 9-to-5 job. So things were really set for me. Once that was gone, I just kind of imploded on myself a little bit in some ways where I found it hard to not have that structure, or, you know, it was either like working through the night and constantly, or doing absolutely nothing because there's not those boundaries. Someone's not expecting me to be there at 9 o'clock and leave at 5, and then I've got 3 hours in the afternoon to do my thing. So I think I'm always learning what I need to sustain this and how I need to set life up. I typically as well have this like massive adrenaline dump after a show, and I just get like super, super emotional for the days after because everything's been leading up to it, and then I just crash and I'm just like, well, I guess I'm never painting again. Like it's been great. Yeah, but I think that took everything I had and I have nothing left. So I don't really know yet. I've become a little bit better at it, and we've just recently, actually since Bali, because we had this discussion about pre-Bali when we had the flu and we were sort of getting ready to go, and just from being sick we ended up in these like really lax routines, and we just had this big inspirational chat about how we want a more routine in our lives, and you know, we've got all this amazing stuff on the go and we want our lives to sort of reflect that energy, and so we've come back and we've like changed up our space and like made some adjustments so that it feels better to be there and we want to be there. So we're just like waking up more excited to go to the studio and to create. So routine's critical for me. I never thought it would be, but to my brain, to my happiness, to my like protecting my little creative balloon, it's just so important to me. And that it's okay to switch off. Like you can have this thing that you're devoting your life to, or that is like slowly becoming this big important work in your life, but you can actually just like put it down of an evening, and it doesn't mean that it's any less important to you, or it's like you're not living this authentic creative life, and you can just play video games and eat dinner and go to bed. Like
be a human.
Just be a human with other interests.
I always felt like there was like I wasn't a proper artist or proper creative person because I didn't have this like, you know, the trope in media and movies and TV and stuff is of the artist who like is drawn to paint and will die if they don't, and that's what they have to do, that's what sets them on fire, and if they don't do that every day, then, you know, they would just burn to a crisp and turn to dust or something. So and I thought, but I thought because I didn't have that. Like I loved making stuff, loved drawing, but I didn't have that thing. I was like, oh, well, there's no point in even trying to be a proper, in inverted commas, artist because, it's not like all consuming, and I thought that that's what everyone else was. You. Yes. Yeah. Yes, the trope of the tortured artist is something we really have to fucking let go of, huh?
Oh, it's just so boring as well. I'm like, it's so lazy.
Singular.
That stereotype, it's so flattening to the completely diverse experiences of being an artist. And I think it's one thing I will absolutely say for art school is it's not necessarily at all what you learn there for your practice, but I think just seeing 100 other artists be regular human beings who can be incredibly talented but also dull.
Just regular people.
And I just demystifying that is such a gift of that space.
Yeah, I guess, and also seeing people struggle with their art making because we have this view of like it's just going to be, you know, it's going to burst out of you and onto the canvas or onto whatever it is, and because it's this like big flaming ball of like torture that's just got to be spewed out of you every day. So it's like, wow, it's beautiful, Picasso. It's like, you see people who just are your friends at art school who would turn up and not be able to do their thing that day.
Yeah.
Which happens. It's still a job,
yeah.
you know?
People that do electric work, but also sometimes it does look a bit like a 9 to 5, you know? Once they've finished coming up with the concept, they're also just executing a thing.
Yeah, there's all this work to do after that. Do you know what was like that for me? Quitting drinking. Was this felt like a big betrayal of being that artist, of like living this life where I laze about in this like sun-filled studio and I drink wine and we talk and it's like it's all very beautiful, that kind of, you know, romantic doesn't exist anymore type of being an artist. And resolving that was quite difficult when I was, because I stopped drinking a year and a half ago-ish now. Didn't intend it to be like this long or to be any kind of length of time. But it's just so much better for my health and my mental health to do that and to make that decision. And everything has just gotten better since. But it was this real like divorcing myself from the notion that I was not going to be as artistic or be as like creative or have this like aloof about me, because especially with drinking was very central to my personality. And being that person who was always down for a drink, and I would like sit in, you know, in a corner of a bar with you for fucking hours and talk. And losing or feeling like I was going to lose that was like very threatening to this artist type life that we imagine all artists live.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, and I think super common in terms of drinking and artistry. Like I've heard, you know, writers talking about how they thought they would never be able to write without drinking, or never be able to paint or have the same type of conversations. So you had the fear of that happening, and then you stopped drinking for a bit. And what was that? I mean, you stopped drinking until now, but I imagine there was a transitional period where it probably still felt a bit like missing out.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of feeling like missing out in so many different ways, because we gather around beverages constantly.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's become this real symbol of celebration, of connection, of you know, do you want to meet for a drink, or do you want to, and that drink, you know, it's just a drink. But we've put this like real again, I think romantic idea behind meeting a friend for a drink. So there was a lot of that socially at the beginning, where I felt like it's going to be glaringly obvious that I'm not drinking and it's going to be a problem. And am I still this person without it? And what was like extremely validating was that I'm exactly who I am without it. I'm still having those conversations. I'm still the person that like within 2 seconds we'll be talking about your, you know, deepest, darkest trauma and, you know, unpacking that, because that's just who I am. And I just love to have those big, meaty discussions with people. So that was really freeing, was like, whether I choose to continue this or not, I am me, and it's not a function of having 3 glasses of wine. And once I had sort of resolved that social anxiety, that, you know, you turn up to a party and the first thing you do is grab a drink because you might be a little bit uncomfortable or a bit tired, or you need to just like force yourself out of your own little, you know, little cave. Once I realized that that actually happens alongside the alcohol, and I think we attribute it to, or your brain makes a link between like, I've had this drink, therefore I feel looser, but you just feel looser because you've acclimatized to the room, like all rooms, you know.
And it's the ritual, really. Like there's something about, it could be tea in that cup. There's just something that's nice about sharing, like imbibing something with other humans. But what is in your cup does not need to be the same thing that's in my cup. No. Like in literally and also metaphorically.
In all ways. Our cups can be filled with different things.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love that kind of ceremony. I love the idea of like, come over, Alice, and we're going to like sit in the sun in the backyard and we're going to like just drink a drink together and talk. I love those kinds of things. But it can be like a really beautiful bottle of non-alcoholic champagne that I've bought for myself whilst you're drinking wine, or whatever it happens to be. I think you don't have to lose those like beautiful ceremony type things, or the way we gather. You don't have to lose that. And you still get to enjoy those friendships. You still get to enjoy yourself, and you might just be better off for it, because I know personally it was the difference between spending the next day, thinking like, oh, what did I say to this person? Did I overshare with Jessamy? Does she think I'm a freak?
No such thing.
I was just going to say.
You're a terrible example. It's like it's hard to reach for the people in front of you for these conversations because you're just not those people. Imagine just being the person in a room that people reach for those kinds of things, and being like it's not like you're super uptight, like Simon.
Poor Simon.
So awkward for all my future conversations with people that I feel like I have to converse with. Simon. I don't know any Simons. Did you know how hard it was just now to think of a name of someone that I didn't know?
Well,
you went with Peter. Was it? I'm pretty sure you went with Peter.
I did?
Yeah.
Ooh, sorry, Peter.
Yeah, good. That was a good one.
No, Peter knows
I don't
how
know
I feel
Peter.
about him.
I don't know.
No,
who
Peter's
Peter
a
is.
good guy. He's a great guy. I can't even remember in what context I use it, but let's say it's Drew.
I don't know.
I'll listen back. I'm like, whoa.
Anyone can
apparently
send
I
in
hate Simon on some level.
Send in the timestamp and you win a prize.
Oh, yeah.
I say that. I have no
Disclaimer,
intention
the prize
to follow
doesn't
through.
exist.
Yeah,
What's this prize you speak
I'm
of?
not going to do it.
Someone needs to
It's a date with Alice Edie.
Yeah, right in, done.
I
Easy.
want that prize.
Yeah, me too. I think we're having the prize.
Yeah. We could also just go for lunch now.
See how we control our time and we're adults with money and stuff? We can probably just go do that.
You know what sometimes I think to myself is that I'm like, oh my God, my parents are always away. Like I always have the house to myself. Like every now and then I just remember that like I can do whatever the fuck I want all the time. And it's like I get that feeling, like that teenager feeling of like mum and dad are away. I'm like, oh, it's every day.
Do you feel like that when Dan's not home, or like if Dan's got plans? Because sometimes I can be like going to golf and I'm like, I can do whatever I want. It's like you can do whatever you want all the time anyway. It's like
I reckon I
do the same things like play PlayStation, have a shower. I'm like, it's like nothing changes, but it is that thing of like, I'm alone.
I'm the master of my own destiny.
I can go anywhere I like.
I get this driving sometimes. I'll just be driving and I'm like, oh my God, I'm driving a car. Like, how is this allowed?
Do you have a license, Alice? Maybe this isn't allowed for some reason. I used to get that though sometimes where I was like, what if I just drove to Adelaide? Like, what if I didn't just drive to the studio today and, like, I just drove to Adelaide? Because you can, because you're in the car and there's highways.
And you're an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, why
And
not?
then I don't.
I do feel that way in the car because I was a very late bloomer to driving as well. I was almost 30 when I got my license.
Really? I did not know this about you.
Yeah, late bloomer to driving. Dan
So it was
actually
just
taught
a
me how to
couple
drive.
days ago, right?
Yeah, just last week.
Dan taught you to drive.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
It's sweet, huh?
Yeah.
So I do think that, like, more often than I'd like to admit. But I also remember, this is really embarrassing, but when around the time I first got my license, I really loved stopping to get petrol because or even like going in and like holding my car keys, and I felt like everyone's looking at me going, wow, look how impressive and grown up she is. She's putting petrol in her own car.
That is adorable.
So proud of myself. And then everyone was like,
jingling your keys.
yeah, look at her
And you're just
filling her car with
saying,
petrol.
like,
What a boss.
Really ordinary things about cars. Like, it's funny how the cap screws in. The picture goes, isn't it?
Does that happen on, I don't know about your car, but mine.
Do you have a screw cap for your? Yes,
I can just imagine you in the queue to pay, like looking at the other people in the queue, just being like, oh, the price of fuel, am I right?
Or just like a silent, like, smile and like chin nod, you know, like, yeah, we know how to drive.
Yeah, we get it.
I got a car.
We have cars.
Hello, fellow adult.
Like that Steve Buscemi meme where he's like, hello, fellow kids.
Yeah.
A little skateboard.
That's me, but it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Like, hello, fellow grown-ups.
Car driving adults. Just here, feet in the car.
Feeding the car.
That's what we call it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm never going to not think that now.
And just like picture. Oh, it'd be so cute to get some like little googly eyes and just stick him at the top of the like where you put the petrol nozzle in, so it's like Phoebe every time you look at it. It's probably combustible and not at all something you should do. Like petrol and an engine. But.
I have follow-up questions. Are the eyes going above the hole in your car? Is it like is it a little open? Oh,
so it's like mouth open, ready for exactly.
All right.
I wish this was a visual podcast for Jessamy's.
Okay.
For Jessamy's example.
You all missed out then.
Do you know what we did once when as a family party? Because I've got a massive, massive family, and we just used to have these family parties that sometimes we'd theme just because I can't remember whose birthday it was, but someone in my family had the idea to get those like little ping pong balls and cut them in half and draw eyes on them. And my entire family of like 50 people, we all put the eyes on like over our eyes. And just had a party with these like ping pong eyes. And
did you look like Muppets? Like Kermit the
it
Frog?
was just like a white ball with these all different types of crazy eyes.
I feel like that would be horrifying.
Yeah.
Imagine walking into that room without knowing what you're coming into.
The pizza delivery guy or like someone's girlfriend new to the family.
Oh,
and
when
like,
did I have that acid that I apparently have?
I've got to go to hospital, so I can't actually be here.
Is there an adult who could drive me?
Because I might just burn it down and drive to another state for no reason.
Wow. I love that as a party theme. Like I love it when there's like it's such a small gesture but then rolled out at scale.
Yeah.
Like I love like when one small kind of silly idea has like a massive amount of follow through.
Yeah. Yep.
Because like one
we're all doing this.
Yeah.
All of us.
Like one person doing that, you're like, yeah. Then like three people, you're like, okay, a bit funny. And then a 20-person family reunion is suddenly insane.
And it's like the level of funny grows as well. It's like it's funny for about 3 minutes with one person doing it, a little longer with like us as a group, but then everyone at the party, it's just fucking hysterical because everywhere you look, there's like children, the elderly, just googly eyes for no reason. And then everyone's like, someone's got a cigarette and is pulling like a real fuck face. It's just great.
Well, we're on the note of googly eyes, we're probably sort of coming to the time where we should wrap up.
Glad we left it there.
Leave on a real deep note, you know? Yeah. Googly eyes at parties. But I'm interested though, Carissa, just in wrapping up, do you have sort of like a mantra or a saying or something that you come back to? Maybe it's something that's come through from your beautiful, big, crazy family or something in your work practice or from a mentor that you kind of cling to maybe when things are feeling a little uncertain or uneasy to sort of connect you back into your Carissa-ness?
I do. There's one that I think of in like sort of various points. It always just comes back to me, and I've been thinking about it a lot recently. And from the first time I heard it, I just loved it. And it's I'll find the person, the name totally escapes me, but I will find the person who I saw this off because it's important, but it is this or something greater. And it's essentially that if you're in a situation that doesn't work out the way that you wanted it to, or if things are good but you want just that there's something else that you're reaching for, that you're putting out there, that I want this or something more, or if this didn't happen, it must mean it's something more is on its way. And why it's important to me is because the art world in particular is so full of rejection. It's at every turn, and you have to hold on to the thing you're doing. You have to do it because you feel that it's important to you to continue to do it. Otherwise, the rejection will kill you, and it will just stamp everything you love out of it, especially with art prizes. And, you know, like last week I got a rejection and it still was just like, oh man, but it happens. So yeah, I love the idea of like this didn't work out, or this didn't go the way that I envisioned it going, but perhaps it's because there's something greater on the way, or it didn't work out because these two things are incompatible. So just wait for the other thing, but it's definitely something greater. than this.
Yeah. Allowing that's the only other possible option is that something great is coming. Like that it's not the wrong thing.
No, it's not that, you didn't get it for whatever reason or you're not supposed to have it. It's just that there's something else coming that you are just not privy to right now. And keep going.
I can't even begin to tell you how much just on a personal level this conversation is exactly what I need to hear right now. And it's just been so valuable and so nourishing, and hanging out with you is always amazing. But just thank you so much for sharing that, and for letting us. I feel with art stuff, so much of it is you see these beautiful works on the wall of a gallery, but you don't get an insight into the messy, real, beautiful humanness of the journey to that point. So thank you for sharing that. And
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry. I was going to say just on that, because for not going to art school, sometimes the path to doing this is not totally clear. And I certainly benefited from the generosity of people who had done it before me in guiding me through it and telling me how to do it. So I just want to put an open call out there to anyone who's thinking about doing it but isn't sure and doesn't have those pathways, that they can always just like knock on my DM door and have a chat, because I'm just so keen to pass on any of the knowledge.
So beautiful.
But thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, beautiful Carissa. You are just a delight.
Thank you for joining us. And where should people go find your work? Your Instagram, your
Instagram is just under my name at Carissa Karamarko, and then that's predominantly my painting and just me and my life, and then the studio stuff is at Studio Ting on Instagram as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, gorgeous Carissa. Thank you, gorgeous Alice.
Thanks, Jess.
See you real soon.
Thank you both.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Imposter Syndrome Club. Please follow us wherever you find your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra kind, rate and review. Or if you got any insights or value from this, share with a friend.
You can also find us on Instagram at imposterpod or online at impostersyndromeclub.com.